Welcome, everyone. I'm Dorothy Baumann-Pauli. I'm the director of the Geneva Center for Business Human Rights, and I'm thrilled to have you back here in this room. This is where this activity started 6 years ago. This is the 6th annual meeting of the Global Business School Network for Human Rights. We now call ourselves an impact community because we're very focused on generating impact with our work. We have this room full, which is wonderful after so many years absent, and we have a larger group online, and it's fantastic that we can have hybrid events so that people from far away can join as well. It's also nice to see you here in the room, and I know many of you have had a long week already with the UN Forum for Business Human Rights in Geneva, so thanks for your stamina to come here on a Friday afternoon and discuss with us what I believe is really addressing the roots for business and human rights challenges, and that we are hoping to change business school education. We need to train future managers in a way that they have human rights on their radar. And I think we have made some progress, yet there's so much more to do. I'm thrilled to be here with my closest colleague, Michael Posner, who actually initiated this whole idea to bring human rights to business schools almost 10 years ago at NYU Stern. And this year is very special because we are also here with a delegation from the ILO. So we are putting into practice something that we started last year. We invited international organizations to our meeting to express their very practical research needs to our network of scholars and educators. And the ILO was thrilled to bridge between their work and business school education. And this has now come into the form of a formal MOU that we've signed together to advance our work jointly going forward with a focus on labor rights. To my left is Dan Leclerc, who joined us from the first years of this event, and he's now directing the Global Business School Network that since years now has supported us tremendously in making our very informal gatherings a bit more formal. I'm glad we're all here and the technology works, to be honest, and that's thanks to his team as well, who had to get up early in the US to support us from afar. So thanks, Nicole and Julie. With this, please, Mike, say a few more words about why we're here together.
Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. And thank you, Dora, you're the lifeblood of this, you make it happen. Just 3 quick things for me. We came together 6 years ago, and we started at Stern almost a decade ago with 3 premises. One is that long overdue for business schools to be teaching human rights, to include it in the curriculum as part of training the next generation of business leaders. It's simply not enough to be teaching finance and marketing, as important as all those things are, statistics, et cetera, without understanding the reality of the 21st century, which is that global businesses are implicated and have a huge effect in the well-being of workers and of human rights. Second is that research needs to also reflect this reality, and it needs to be applied research, not just theoretical, but trying to make practical evaluations of corporate behavior, how companies are affecting the societies where they operate, and what they should and need to be doing differently. And then the third bit is to apply that research in engagement and advocacy. The fact is the business community has been too insulated from a lot of these concerns. And we as business educators have an inside track to be able to talk to businesses on their home turf about the things that they need to be doing to be responsible. So that's why we started all this. It's great that you're all here. We're really appreciative also to our friends from the ILO for joining us.
And great to have a core group. Many of you I've known for many years. Some are new, which is fantastic as well, because of course we want to grow our network. So really welcome to all of you. I said we made some progress over the past years, and to show this progress, we've actually produced a video where we bring together multiple stakeholder voices that attest that what we do together makes sense, that this is actually very useful. And so the ILO has been wonderful in editing the voices that we collected over the past weeks. From all kinds of backgrounds that want to support us in our work, from businesses to students, to representatives of ILO constituencies. Let's watch this video together and then we'll get to the MOU.
Julie, unmute
Have
yourself.
no sound.
And Julie, unmute yourself.
Oh, that's it. Here only
Are you sharing this?
There's no sound arriving on our end.
Yeah, no sound. Who's playing it?
You need to share the sound, I think, as well, from whoever is playing it.
Back to COVID.
Our sound. It's true. I have to share the sound.
It's funny because the person playing it can't actually hear it.
Yeah,
Just
Probably have to
pray.
maybe unshare and share again and make sure you share the sound.
Julie, are you playing it?
Yes, I am. As it would have played, would have talked to each
You
other.
got it now. You might want to start from the beginning.
All good.
Let's see here.
All good. Slow.
Maybe we need 21st century internet bandwidth.
This is not.
Maybe we don't have some.
Today's business student are tomorrow's managers, innovators, decision makers, investors, consumers, and global citizens. In their hands lie the future of work and the responsibility to promote decent employment opportunities and fair treatment in the workplace.
It's absolutely essential that our new generation of entrepreneurs not only understand how to manage a business, but they understand that people have rights and that this is fundamental to the business plan.
Les étudiants et étudiantes de nos écoles de commerce font partie de cette génération. Ils et elles veulent s'emparer des questions de droits de l'homme et des questions environnementales dans les modèles économiques des entreprises. Vous, étudiants et étudiantes, irez à trouver des solutions créatives à ces grands défis. Notre rôle ici au niveau du BIT est simplement de vous fournir les ressources nécessaires pour y parvenir.
Responsible business conduct does not mean to do business as usual and then try to fix the problem, try to fix the negative impact afterwards. But what it really means is to promote human rights consideration.
Business students must understand that the laws are very clear. You cannot run a business on exploitation. We know that tax law is taught in business schools. We know that trade management is taught in business schools, but human and labor rights are not actually focused on. There are three pillars: due diligence or risk analysis. There is grievance, so every business ought to have a grievance procedure in order to effect remedy, which is the third pillar.
Je voudrais que vous vous joigniez à notre effort. Et pour vous joindre à notre effort, vous devriez mieux comprendre ce qui arrive dans le monde.
The MOU between the University of Geneva, together with the ILO and together with the Global Business School Network Science, can really promote the agenda in this regard.
All students, faculty members, and education stakeholders must also apply the labor rights standard in business education.
I see the added value of creating bridges between the normative and technical expertise of the ILO and the business school community. In the new VUCA environment we live in, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, I look forward to seeing how the next generation of business graduates contributes to transforming companies for the better.
The idea of integrating human rights in business school education started at NYU Stern in 2013, where we launched the first Business Human Rights Center. We then took this idea to Geneva in 2019, where we started the Geneva Center for Business Human Rights. And those two institutions are currently the only two institutions that fully institutionalize human rights in business school education. But we're happy to also run a network of business schools around the world that want to advance this agenda with us.
Leadership is service. That's why I think that talking about human rights, talking about environmental sustainability, talking about ethics is important for all institutions of higher learning, including schools.
Human rights is essential for the success of any business today.
I work at Asian Institute of Management in the Philippines. You know, we hear so much about what's being done to human rights and bringing this issue into the curriculum in a more integrated manner. So the youngsters coming out of our business schools, when they become the leaders of tomorrow, they are much more keenly aware of the impact of the decisions they make in terms of how we can think about the sustainability as a whole. So I wholeheartedly endorse and support anything related to human rights, especially when it comes to how we think about sustainability issues. I had several business and human rights related courses during my bachelor studies, and I wanted to go a lot further than we could, which is why I enrolled into this master's, because I wanted this red thread of human rights throughout the entire curriculum.
We know a lot about, for example, the fashion industry, but there's some other industries that aren't given the light. And I feel like it's very important for the next generation of leaders, which are us at the business schools, to actually understand the company or the industries that we enter into. And by doing that, we can make a difference and really change the way business human relation issues are viewed and tackled in the future.
I believe that business and human rights is increasingly relevant in the corporate world, and I hope to be able to make a difference from within a company.
And doing social innovation and actually learning about business human relation issues and labor issues on an international scale, I found it very sad and problematic that only at 23, I got to learn about this, when I felt like it should have been something I learned about at 18 or during my undergraduate.
I think that going beyond theory is incredibly important in management because it shows us all of the unintended consequences that can occur in the field.
Not enough to say that human rights are important. You actually have to do something about that. So how do you turn something like sustainability goals into the specific things needed to meet sustainability goals? That might be that you need to identify what skills are needed, get people trained, and get people in the right jobs, but without thinking through the practicalities of how you meet your goals. You can't meet your goals.
What I see nowadays is that in every supply chain, everywhere around the world, the social aspect is becoming more and more important.
How do we ensure that we transition to a low carbon economy that ensures decent work for all? And so I think because of all this, it is really essential that students have sustainability and climate training that's also complemented by training that makes them aware of human rights and social issues, that when they go into their workplaces, they're able to say, okay, this is the value chain that I work in, and this is how I can understand and identify where there might exist labor rights abuses, and these are some of the mechanisms in place to provide workers with channels to remedies.
I don't think any business can be successful without a strong commitment to sustainability. That's why we need strong leaders. We need trained leaders, young leaders, be ready to embark in this journey. And I would say it's even more than a requirement. It's an opportunity. I think any students, anybody, learning business should realize how big the opportunity is to commit and engage in this sustainability journey. So join us.
Continuer
à porter le flambeau de ces affaires dans les entreprises que vous allez diriger demain?
Alors vraiment, il est temps maintenant d'harmoniser et de généraliser le respect des droits dans le monde du travail, dans les chaînes d'approvisionnement, que ce soit des chaînes globales ou nationales. Et cela passe par les leaders des entreprises d'aujourd'hui et surtout d'encourager une nouvelle génération de chefs d'entreprise pour qui le droit de diligence en matière de droits de l'homme fait partie intégrante de leur identité, de leur ADN.
The ILO is proud to collaborate with business schools globally to help equip new generations of business students with the guidance they need to become the business leaders of tomorrow. Leaders who make the future of work a better and more equitable one for all.
Great. I'm so happy we got this video to work because I think it sets the tone for our meeting. It has such an encouraging message and that indeed support for our work is growing. And to me and the ones who, Charles and Maria and others who helped to collect these voices, it was certainly motivating to hear how much support we're getting from all kinds of constituents. We have invited the rector of the university to join us. He's currently traveling and he will join us eventually. We will leave him in when he arrives, but he was very keen to be with us today because he was supporting our work from day one and he's remains our biggest supporter. So he will join whenever he arrives. For now, I would like to introduce Manuela Tumay, the Assistant Director General of the ILO, with whom we've signed this MOU, and I would like you to ask you to speak first on what are we actually doing together. We're putting into very formal ways now a collaboration that we've discussed last year, and we will now be working together on developing teaching tools and joining expertise. So Manuela, please.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. I remember that in the midst of COVID, we had a meeting online in which indeed this idea was being explored, was being discussed. We at the ILO were saying, okay, what are the implications? Shall we embark on this? I guess that you were having similar considerations at your end. And so it's really very, very nice that indeed this idea and this project has come to a fruition, and there are some concrete things that are coming up. I understand that there has been a very intense quick in which you have been dealing with one of the most complex and challenging sectors, which is the fishing industry, which is multi-layered and with serious problems indeed in terms of violation of labor rights. Yeah. I was given a very nice piece of paper in which I was supposed to thank each and every of you. So I would just thank you collectively. But I have just participated this morning in a roundtable with a number of companies to discuss precisely the issue of how to eradicate child labor in supply chains, whether global or domestic. And what I really was quite impressed, as I was impressed by your enthusiasm and all the testimonies, is this realization that indeed human rights, labor rights are no longer a sort of afterthought, but are very much linked also to the whole issue of environmental concerns. So it's no longer this, there is greater realization of the need for linking economy with social issues and the environment. So there is a new narrative that is established, but certainly a greater realization of the need for acting on these three fronts simultaneously. And it's certainly the business world has a very important role to play. And which brings then one other issue that they raised was, yes, but how to? We all agree on the fact that indeed we need to pay due attention to these issues. We may perhaps not understand fully also the interlinkages among these three factors. So they were asking indeed for greater guidance in terms of making those interconnections more explicit. So I thought that was quite interesting. And secondly, they were very, very much interested in indeed the how to, yes, which is the most difficult part. And that's why I think the sort of value addition of the memorandum that we are signing today and this coming together of different networks is that you bring the academic excellency, the rigor, the perspectives. And we bring, I think, the ILO practical experience and expertise of those indeed who play a very important role in shaping, the economies and taking decisions, right? We are talking of, businesses, we're talking of employers, organizations, we are talking of trade unions, labor movement, who is another very important actor to take into account in determining, labor outcomes. So I really look forward towards our continued cooperation. And I'm very, very, very energized by the fact that there is a business case, you made a business case for placing human rights, including labor rights, at the heart of the curricula of the business school. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the continued cooperation.
Thank you, Manuela, for your support and for sharing your experience with this roundtable conversation directly. It certainly corresponds to what we are seeing as well. And I think business schools are ideally positioned to address the how question. These are the types of skills we want to teach future managers. Thank you very much. I know the Vice Rector of the University of Geneva, Stéphane Berthet, is very keen to respond immediately to this and highlight the role that these type of collaborations also play for the university. Stéphane, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Thank you, Doro.
Thank you for joining us, Stéphane.
You might want to spotlight Stéphane. Can you do that? So he shows up bigger on our screen.
Stéphane, but we can hear you well and see you well.
It's okay. You hear me well, or?
Perfect. Thank you.
Bigger.
But we can't see you very well.
Perhaps it's on your side that you can change the image, but.
That's top of the screen. And I know that Yves has arrived as well. The rector of the University of Geneva, Yves Lückeker, I think we'll ask him to speak after Stéphane. So.
Okay, so perhaps I start just before Yves. So, dear Mrs. Thomae, Assistant Director General of the ILO, dear representatives of ILO, dear colleagues, it's for me a great pleasure to welcome you to the University of Geneva for this meeting of the Global Business School Network. And this pleasure today is threefold. Firstly, this business school network was founded and launched here at the Geneva School of Economics and Management in 2017. Secondly, for this session, we are very pleased to welcome representatives of the ILO. And last but not least, respect for human rights, which will be part of your discussions today, is a very important value for the University of Geneva, along with academic freedom, sensitivity to diverse cultures, ethics, and humanism. So therefore, this meeting, it's also the opportunity for the University of Geneva to highlight the effort of the entire team of our Geneva Center for Business and Human Rights, led by Professor Baumann-Polly, as well as those of the NYU Stern Center for Business and Human Rights, to make human rights an integral part of business school education, not only in Geneva and New York, but also in business school worldwide. This is an excellent result that is echoed in the Global Business School Network, which includes more than 100 business schools around the world, but it is also of interest to international organizations such as the ILO. And this is why we are so pleased to see the close links that have been established between our Business and Human Rights Center and the ILO. This type of link is perfectly in line with our policy of internationalization and a relation with what is called here in Geneva, the International Geneva. Our university is attentive to the world around us and cultivates links both with the local socio-economic community and with the international community of Geneva. If this exceptional international environment at the heart of which we find ourselves in Geneva is an asset and a characteristic feature of our university, which reinforces its international dimension, our university is also an asset for this environment. Therefore, it is important for us to continually develop the links we have with many international organizations and non-governmental organizations based in Geneva. In addition to this exchange of expertise, this relation also enables us to offer very attractive courses to our students. In particular, the MOU signed recently with ILO will facilitate the pooling of expertise and resources between the Global Business School Network, University of Geneva, and ILO to advance human rights in academia and in practice. For example, the joint development of teaching resources can help ensure that expertise on the establishment of international labor rights around the world is brought back into the classroom and that future managers are well prepared to meet the challenges of human rights in business. Within our Geneva School of Economics and Management, several programs will be able to directly use this jointly developed material, such as the new Master in Responsible Management and the Master in Commodity Trading. So we are very pleased with the development of this collaboration with the ILO, and it is great to see that different sections of the ILO are supporting this engagement with business schools. So thank you to ILO and thank you to the entire delegation for being with us today in person. So I wish you an excellent and fruitful meeting. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Thanks for having us. Eve, may I check if you're online with us? Would you like to add to Stefan's?
Yes, sure. I am online. I don't know if you can hear me.
Very well, thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm really sorry, first of all, not to be with you in person because I'm still in Bern, waiting to get my train to be back in Geneva, but I will not be on time to be with all of you. I will really have loved to be there in Geneva because I think what has been done during the last year is really wonderful and very important. It's important for the Faculty of Economic and Management. It's very important for all our universities. So thank you very much to everybody who is there in Geneva just to have this annual meeting, which is very, very important. So dear Excellencies, dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to be very short time with you. It's great to see that this network has grown since it was launched in Geneva in 2017 and has been meeting annually since. I was participating, in fact, in person in this first meeting, and it's important that you continue coming together to advance human rights in business school education. It's very important. It's something that the young people need, and they are asking for that, and you are doing it. So we need really to very much support that development. This issue, this network is dealing with more important now than ever. Human rights in business are a central concern for managing global supply chains, for the use of new technology, or for the role of business in conflicts. It's increasingly important for business schools to balance different types of research, and the Geneva Center for Business and Human Rights does translational research that highlights practical application. And our students, they are very much looking forward to have this kind of application because they want to also to understand better the world in which they are living. They want to understand better what they can do in order to develop this kind of approach. And again, thank you very much to the Geneva Center for Business and Human Rights for doing that. I think it's exactly what the students need very much to have before they leave the university. This type of research complements the traditional peer review research for academic journals. And this is also very important that when we are looking now at the production of research, that we have another look at what people are producing. It's also this kind of impact that we need really to evaluate. As business and governments are looking for leadership from business schools, translational research is increasingly relevant, and it can help shape corporate operations and government policies. So thank you very much for what you are doing, and very much looking forward for the next meeting. Maybe I will not be anymore the director of the University of Geneva, but I'm going to follow what you are doing in Geneva. It's very important. Thank you very much, Doro, and all your team for what you do since 2017. Thank you very much, and have a very nice and fruitful meeting this afternoon. Bye-bye.
Yves, thank you very much. Thank you for making an effort to be with us, and thanks for your kind words and your support. It's been indispensable to have you and Stefan supporting our work here at the University of Geneva. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan, please, you're the next one. In the
Usually that would come with something like last, but not least. Well, a lot has already been said, of course. In fact, GBSN has already spoken. Sumitra Dutta, who was on the video, is not only the dean at Oxford Said Business School, but he's the chair of the Global Business School Network. And Chik-Young Kang, the Asian woman who's the president, dean, and CEO of the Asian Institute of Management, is a board member of GBSN. So GBSN has already spoken, and I'm but seriously, this video, a big round of applause for this video. What surprises me is we don't see often enough on the same video UN leaders, government leaders, business school leaders, and students all talking about the same thing, and more importantly, in the same way, right? Where we're moving in the same direction. And I think this is critical. In fact, if I had to put my finger on one thing that I hope, there's many other things, mind you, but one thing is that, we're building this connective tissue that I think is going to be extremely important for being able to lead in the future, this connective tissue between business, government, civil society, and higher education. And we do think at GBSN that business schools need to take a lead role in that effort, and particularly important. And just to reinforce what several people have talked about, this is not just about helping our students to understand business and human rights together, integrate them. But it's also about putting them in a position to lead, right? When you think about this, we don't want to graduate students that just want to go to work in the system. We want to graduate students that are prepared to help improve and change the system, right? And the same with research, putting our faculty in a better position so that we could be supportive of the kinds of agendas we need moving forward is particularly important. So this is very exciting for GBSN. And as I stated many other times, you have our full commitment to engage the network of GBSN, but remember the network of GBSN is there to engage a much broader group of business schools as well. So we're really excited and privileged to be in this position to work with University of Geneva and with the ILO.
Nice. Great. It's so wonderful to hear that everyone is so excited about this, but of course it's a piece of paper. And so often in our work, we have something on paper, which then in practice doesn't mean so much. So it was very important to us to immediately put substance to what we're now committing ourselves to, namely to join forces and expertise. So I'm very happy that we've already embarked on one project that highlights how we could work together and what we could each of us bring to the table. And I'd like to ask Charles Otheman, the lead of our research cluster on global supply chains, to explain to us what he's been doing with a group of fantastic experts over the course of the past 3 days. It exemplifies what we could do through this MOU, and hopefully also inspire other research clusters to explore this type of activity or other types of activities with GBSN and ILO. Charles, please tell us what you've been working on.
Thank you, Doro. I hope people can see me and the rest of the room as well. Yeah, and we'll invite our friends from the International Labour Organization who are very busy and who took some time to come and be with us to continue with their day. And thanks a lot for being here. You will receive the full draft of this teaching resource, and we expect your comments. And
Sure. Oh, this is a workshop.
This is what we No, so thanks a lot for being here with us. And yes, please, I know you need to continue. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And so for our friends online and those in the room who are staying, I'll tell you quickly what we did. We basically designed the type of course, I would have liked to have studied maybe 15 years ago when I was a student in a business school. So yeah, I'm the lead of this cluster, as Doro just said, on supply chains, looking at supply chains and severe human rights violation. We often talk about modern slavery. Today is the 2nd of December, the International Day for the Abolition of Slavery. We can reflect whether it's been abolished or not. I prefer to speak about specific issues because we have international labor standards on them, such as forced labor, for example. And this is what specifically we try to do, look at how we can teach issues like forced labor. In business schools, I myself teach these issues at HEC in France. And so what we did for a couple of days here is we brought GBSN expertise, so different lecturers who are here in the room. So Cécile from the University of Cape Town. I know we have other other lecturers from Cape Town. Hi, Camille, who's here as well in Cape Town right now. Raymond Babanao, who is a business school lecturer, but also a preeminent fisheries expert in Ghana, teaches at GIMPA in Accra. Christina Stringer from the University of Auckland, who had a long journey to come from New Zealand, but has been really most probably one of our biggest experts in this network, specifically around forced labor in fisheries. Jaka Aminata, who teaches in Diponegoro University in Central Java, in this very specific region in Central Java, Indonesia, where so many fishers, migrant fishers, Indonesian migrant fishers come from. Victor, who joined us from the University of Pennsylvania, from Wharton, as well. Sandy from Curtin University in Australia. Berit Knack from the University of Geneva. Doro, Mike as well. So we were a group of business school practitioners. And then we joined forces with ILO specialists, most of which have not studied in business schools, but are very knowledgeable about these very issues. So Maria Gallotti, who's sitting next to me, who leads a lot of the work of the ILO on issues pertaining to the recruitment of migrant workers and the recruitment of workers in general. Alix Nasri, who coordinates a program, which is a very innovative program, which supported this meeting that we did, which is trying to, move forward on the elimination of forced labor and child labor. You might all know that this is part of the 2030 agenda. We are, if I can say so, failing our global objectives. We are supposed to eliminate child labor by 2025, and we still have 160 million children in child labor. And the latest estimates, which were published about 2 months ago by the ILO, global estimates on forced labor, tell us there is somewhere around 28 million workers in forced labor. And we are a year and a half away from the target for child labor and 6 years away from the target from forced labor. So that's the reality. Several other colleagues from the ILO joined online. We had also some people from the field of business, notably responsible investment. And so we went through a little bit of a nightmare, which is trying to think what GBSN members need, from Peru to Nigeria to France to Australia, teaching undergrad, master, executive education courses. So it's so diverse that it's very difficult. So there's still quite some polishing to do because, as always happens, everyone has some bright ideas and no one is very good at trimming down everything that's in it. But we now have a template, which is really important, of what could be a teaching tool. So it's not just an idea of how to set up a 3-hour lecture on this topic. It's how to contextualize content that is produced globally to your local audience, where to find speakers to come into your classroom, how to access comments from the supervisory mechanisms of the ILO, which tell you a lot about what is happening in your country, learn about international law of the sea. So we've really put all of these resources. We've worked on infographics, visualization, feedback loops. So the idea is that this is not, a tool that is cast in stone. Not at all. It's just an idea that's out there in the classroom, and that should be tested and improved every time it's taught. We want lecturers to tell us how they did it, what worked, what didn't work. So it was really a fascinating experience. And we're exhausted. Alex, you might want just to say a word. You supported this project and you contributed a lot. So I think it's the first time from your perspective in the ILO to engage like this with business schools. So it might be interesting for the audience to know about it.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks for having us this week. I think for us, first of all, it's really great to see that today we are celebrating the MOU, but in fact, we have already put it in action. And I think that's great because, as you were saying, sometimes it stays on the desk, and this is really what we don't want to do. So I think we achieved a lot in those 3 days. Thanks a lot for everyone who participated. I think that's been really amazing to have you and your perspective there. One thing that I found was particularly interesting and great is that in some of the countries where you teach, we also have a presence, especially in the fishing sector. So I feel there's a lot of things that we can also directly put in place when you're back. And so to also make these links with our teams on the ground and how we link this teaching material to really the realities on the ground will be quite helpful and good. So no, I think overall we're extremely positive and hopeful on what this collaboration will bring, and hopefully with this first teaching resource, which is on a sector which has been totally in the dark for a very long time and that needs really to come at the top, given its importance worldwide economically and the importance of the many labor abuse that still happen in the sector. I think that's a great start for our collaboration. So thanks a lot again. And
no, thank you both for supporting this. Charles, you've been the leader of this, and your support, Alex, was so important in that. Yeah, I think we're innovating pedagogy here as well, in that we have a collaborative process to develop such a tool. And then, of course, we count on Dan's support of a platform that allows us then to modularize and pull out different drawers, as we called it, then to make this teaching resource adaptable to different geographies, to different disciplinary perspectives. And I'm really excited about this too. And I committed that I will use this tool in February, March, as I'm teaching business human rights here in the Master of Responsible Management program. So I'll do the first test run, so we have a clear target date as well to finalize and polish.
And,
thank you so
and just a quick announcement to say that, I mean, we worked in a little of an invitation to find the right lecturers, but we're already planning a second tool. Otherwise, the MOU is not finished as it started. And Maria Galotti, who's here, who participated in the workshop, where we really want to try and work, hopefully, for our next workshop on the topic of recruitment. We focus a lot on labor abuses that happen, let's say, in destination countries in the context of migration. We sometimes overlook that a lot of the abuse happens back in the country of origin through unscrupulous recruitment. This is a very big issue, one that is often very easily actionable by companies if they really want to improve recruitment practices within their activities. So hopefully in a couple of months, we'll send out invitations to gather a new group of lecturers to work on designing a second and then further teaching resources on topics of interest.
I just wanted to ask, what's next? Here we go. So there's already something in the pipeline, equally relevant and exciting. So this is a research cluster that's very dynamic. As you know, about 3 years ago, we decided to divide up our growing network into research clusters. We actually workshopped those research cluster topics, and the 6 research clusters that we have right now, these were the themes in context where we had a small group of people that said, we want to work on this together. So Charles' leadership now on global supply chains, it's an invitation for network participants that are not yet in any of the clusters to potentially join a cluster, because this is where throughout the year, we're working together on very concrete things. We don't want commitments on paper. We want to really turn them into something very practical that we can all use in our teachings and that we can share. Charles, is there something else in terms of what you hope to do going forward with your research cluster on global supply chains? Because we're now transitioning to the updates from all the working clusters. So you're first up.
Thank you. Okay. No, very quickly, thanks for the members of the cluster for being in the room as well virtually. Some of them are here. Christina, who is in the cluster, Doro, you as well are here. So very happy to represent you. A little update of what we've been doing this year. We've been growing and diversifying the membership of the cluster. I think that's very important. So we have now about roughly 20 members. We created a WhatsApp group. I was told that's not very academic always, but it seems to work quite well now, because one of the challenges also for this work we're doing is to find the right ways to engage. We're all very busy. It's not always very easy. One of the issues that's of interest in our cluster that we're going to be working on is obviously the 10-year anniversary of the Rana Plaza. This is happening on April 2023, so just in a couple of months. If we want to be able to do something interesting in some of the business schools of the GBSN network, we need to plan right now. So I don't think Sanchita from Berkeley is here, because it's maybe 3 o'clock in the morning and she's not yet back home. She's been a force in the network. She's obviously a very strong specialist of this issue. And so we're really trying to think about how we can do something around this event, reflect on 10 years, what we've learned, have also an open conversation about the progress that has been made, what still needs to be achieved, probably look at issues related to occupational safety, because Rana Plaza speaks a lot about this. So that's what's in the network. We're always looking for new members, and yeah, we're very happy to be working on this important issue.
Great, thank you so much, Charles. Let's now turn one by one to the other research cluster leads to provide a quick update on their work. And as we are clustered about 3 years ago, of course, the world keeps developing. So we also can critically reflect on, shouldn't there be a cluster on yet another topic? Or is there a cluster that wants to maybe join forces with another cluster? So what I'm saying is these clusters are not set in stone. We can dynamically change them as well. So, but let's move on to let's say Karin Buhmann, if she's here with us, she was here in the building 2 days ago, but now she has to go back to Denmark, and she leads the cluster on climate change, human rights, and fair transitions together with Stefan Park from the University of Connecticut. I'm not sure how you divided up the work on the report out, but Karin or Stefan, let us know what you've been doing with your group.
Thank you very much, Doro. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So I've just joined the meeting actually in between other meetings, and Stefan is here as well. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to share some of the work that we're doing in the cluster on business and human rights and climate change. So following, I'm just going to say a few words, and then I'm going to leave it to Stefan to add what you would like to, Stefan. So following a couple of meetings that we had in the cluster, we saw that there was a keen interest among many members to understand more about climate change and business and human rights. And we also found that there was a certain interest in issues related to the fair transition and sustainable finance. And so at the beginning of this year, Stefan and I started having a couple of series of meetings where we tried to look at how we could explore that and work on those interconnected topics also in the light of the need to provide finance for climate change mitigation. And the green transition, and in view of the increasing concerns with adverse human rights impacts on land rights, on communities, in terms of stakeholder engagement, in order to address sort of the survival of humanity in the long term, that certain people are actually suffering disproportionately short term. And so this led to a couple of ideas, and most actively a workshop held 2 days ago at the exact premises where you are in Geneva at the university, also with hybrid attention, where we invited members of the GBSN network and other networks that we are involved in related to business and human rights, with a particular interest in this topic of climate change, the fair transition in business and human rights, to share some of their research interests, ongoing research, and discuss how we might move on with this. So with this introduction, Stefan, I'll leave it to you to fill in the details.
Thank you, Karin.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Karin. So the exploratory workshop that we hosted earlier this week addressed a range of different topics and themes and questions and challenges that are relevant to a fair and just transition, and generally speaking, the importance of business and human rights in the context of climate change, including transition risk and transitional justice. We discussed the ways in which we may be able to engage collaboratively on these issues and questions, and also discussed various modes by which we could further and deepen our engagement. At the moment, we are contemplating hosting a hybrid joint site symposium in 2023 with this group and 2 others with an interest and who are engaged on these questions through their research. In addition, we have discussed the possibility of publishing either through an open access journal special issue or an edited volume some of the cutting edge research on these topics, and then also discussed various other related inputs that we think would be deeply impactful from an educational perspective, including various programs and reports and case studies that would arise from this convening and the research being done on these issues. There lastly was an interest in seeking input from the greater GBSN membership, including those here, and about other organizations and other sort of topical focus areas that are relevant to the question of a fair and just transition and business human rights in the context of climate change. And so that process is ongoing, but that may be one avenue through which the work that this research cluster is doing can be shared in the short term with this group and the GBSN generally to identify the scope of the topic of fair and just transition. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Stefan. This sounds really interesting, and I look forward to remaining part of this group because my research relates to just and fair transitions as well. Let us know when this convening might happen, because we can then put that up on our newsletter and join this with the rest of the group. All right. I think I'd like to ask if Esther is here with us, Esther Henschen. She has been leading the research cluster on extractives, and I know she's tried for a couple of years now, and there are just not enough people apparently right now who work on this. And so I've suggested to Esther to potentially join forces with Karin and Stefan, because fair and just transitions require more mining in a lot of ways. And so maybe we're combining those research clusters. But Esther, are you here with us? And do you want to quickly say hello? No, she's not here. So this is my suggestion to people that originally were interested in the extractives cluster to reach out to us, and we see how we can combine forces with the just and fair transitions cluster. We have with us here in the room Lara Bianchi, who has been the leader for the cluster on human rights and gender. And I'd like to ask her to tell us what she's been working on with her fantastic group.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be in the room.
Yeah.
I remember our first meeting in 2017, and having such a big group is so joyful, actually, really happy to be here. But my co-lead actually is on the call, Samantha, and she's enjoying Brazil at the moment, and she will chip in a second. But I just wanted to mention what we are doing in terms of research cluster. We want to bring together scholars from business schools working on gender studies with a human rights lens. So it's a pretty niche group of people working on a research topic that actually intersects very much also other clusters, as you were mentioning, the modern slavery one, but also the extractive. I've done work on mining as well, and the gender issue in mining is a massive one. So Mike mentioned applied research, and Manuela stressed the importance of understanding the how-to, and I guess we are all pure academics, so it's a big challenge for us actually to understand how to contribute in that. So I think our main goal as a research cluster is absolutely to try and map out what is out there, and we want to be a hub of knowledge in terms of gender. There is a lot of gender studies, great scholars out there, but many of them are now in business schools. So it's quite novel being in business schools and working on gender and human rights. If you are running research projects, or if you are writing papers on gender and you are in a business school, get in touch. We would like to help you to get your research out there as possible as we can. We did, as a cluster, had a very traditional meeting last academic year. We shared teaching gender studies in business schools, and we shared what is happening. For example, I teach sexual harassment as a human rights challenge to business school students, and that's quite uncomfortable in a way because it goes outside of their usual teaching topics, but it's also very rewarding. Samantha shared her experience as well in teaching in different countries. At the moment, she's in Brazil, but she teaches also in China, which is a tough cookie for human rights. But then after the traditional meeting, we just thought, let's try and be more innovative. And of course, we didn't go as far as our colleagues in the forced labor group went, but we had the idea of having podcasts, and we recorded our first podcast a month ago. Samantha will say more in a second, but the point is, we are a very diverse group. We want to be more inclusive, and we want to be innovative. And maybe podcast is a way for reaching out practitioners, policymakers, but also students or research colleagues around the world that are interested in the research that we are doing. So I'm gonna pass on to Samantha for more details.
Samantha, thanks for joining us from Brazil. I know it's early for you, but Samantha has been co-leading the cluster actually with Lara over the past year. And so thanks for being with us.
Thanks for welcoming me online, and bom dia, gente. It's great to be in Brazil and also learning about the business and human rights landscape here. I'll have a chance to meet more colleagues in São Paulo next week. In Belo Horizonte, where I am at the moment, it's only starting, although there is a lot of issue around mining, and we know about the Brumadinho dam collapse a matter of a few years ago, and the difficulty of local communities to actually access remedy in what is a fairly corrupt place, I gather. But so anyway, there is a lot to be done here, and I don't know if there are also colleagues from Brazil who are around, but I'd love to get to meet them. I'll be back in Belo Horizonte. It's been a pleasure to work with Lara and also meet other colleagues who are interested in working on gender issues, but also migration issues, which is more my field. And that's what we did in our seminar back in February. And as Lara mentioned, we thought that the best way to actually expand our connections, but also share knowledge in a much more engaged way would be to use podcasts. We've probably all become attuned to the use of listening in our kitchen or in our cars or all that. So we were very lucky to have the Institute of Policy at Nottingham, who sponsored this Knowledge Engage podcast on gender research in business school with a human rights perspective. And our point in this podcast was to bring together CSR scholars. We had Dr. Lauren McCarthy from Bayes Business School who contributed, with also Doro. Thank you so much for your input on this podcast, and then Lara and myself who work on irregular migration also in Europe. So it'd be really interesting to know now on the basis of this introductory podcast if we could have maybe other contributions, and also how to produce them. And if there are other contributions, it'd be great to hear from people in different regions working on different sectors, which obviously involve gender issues or gender plus issues, in the sense that, well, gender is a very important and critical lens, but there is also all the matter of intersectionality, with which I work a lot, which should be brought into that. But as we found and discussed in the podcast, it might not be that easy to bring gender issues in business school curricula, as well as business and human rights. It might be a struggle in the countries where we are. I mean, for one, France can be quite misogynistic in many ways, and the response we have from colleagues when we start talking about gender in social entrepreneurship, there is a real wall. So like business and human rights, maybe this is another ceiling to break, and really we would like to invite others to contribute to this discussion for shorter podcasts and have a series. But would it be possible? Would we get the support of GBSM? Maybe the ILO also could have a link, and maybe other institution like the Institute of Policy at Nottingham to see that move forward. So that would be great if that's of interest, obviously, to the group, and maybe there would be other podcasts on other clusters.
Excellent idea. I love that, Samantha. Thank you. And please put the link to the current podcast in the chat if you can, so that
it is up in the chat with the details.
Perfect.
And again, thanks to the Institute of Policy for making that possible. And that's Lara's institute, not SCHEMA yet.
Next time. Thank you so much. That's fantastic, really. And of course, the gender issue cuts across all industries in business human rights. So we also don't want these clusters to be silos, but I would encourage you to reach out to each other and see how your work intersects. And we have 3 more clusters to hear updates from. I know that we have a new cluster lead, Alexandra Grameneu, who has been taking over from her colleague who left the institute in Zurich. So please, I know you haven't convened your cluster yet and you haven't figured out yet how you want to move forward, but I want you to say hello and thank you for coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yes. And it's very interesting. So it's I took over from Herbert Winnistorfer, unfortunately left last August, and now we're a completely new team with Professor Christian Vöcklin and Professor Marco Clemente. So we're still figuring out how we want to contribute in all of this. And if I will not stay ahead, but someone will take over for sure. But we want to keep the channel open and be active, because it's I mean, business and human rights is we have been teaching it in our bachelor and master programs, and of course very important and integral part of the education that we want to give to our business students. Yeah, I hope to still get to know the network, meet all of you and see how we can engage, also get inspired from other clusters on what they are doing, workshops, seminars, like all of this is like very exciting. So thank you very much for sharing all of this, and we'll take everything to account for the next months.
Thank you, Alexandra, for your commitment to take over. And of course, your work on human rights due diligence also cuts across all the other industry-focused clusters. The next cluster I want to briefly give a presentation is the research cluster on human rights and technology, led by Björn Fasterling, who is hoping for additional support for his cluster. But Björn, tell us more.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Doro. And I wish I could be with you in Geneva. In any case, the cluster, we have had a few meetings, and it also led to some teaching collaboration and ideas for joint publications. But compared to what Charles and what Karen are doing, I would consider the cluster a dormant one. This is not because the subjects are lacking. I could think about recent European legislation, upcoming European legislation on platforms and on artificial intelligence that very much addresses human rights issues. I could think of all the research that is done by our colleagues in computer science. There's very much research about biases and algorithmic fairness. And I think we as researchers at business schools should deal with these subjects. It should make sense out of what is coming out of computer science. And the third, considering the collaboration with the ILO, big chapters, of course, people analytics and the use of advanced analytics in the human resource context. So these are subjects that I'd love to work on with people in the research cluster. And indeed, Doro, as you said, I'll be very glad if somebody would help with the lead, or even take over the lead for this research cluster.
Thank you, Björn. You've also been with our network from day one. So thanks for, at the time, I remember spontaneously stepping up saying, sure, I can lead human rights in tech. You heard his plea for additional support. We will work on that. And there's a lot going on in the tech space, as you said, on the legal side, but also from a company perspective. My colleague, Paul Barrett at NYU Stern has been writing reports over the past years on a series of issues. And so clearly there's also more need for research and I think collaboration, probably even across disciplines, as you pointed out, Björn. So I think it would be a shame to not have a research cluster on human rights and tech, given how important that industry is and how prevalent human rights challenges are in that industry right now. So I hope we can reinvigorate the work of this cluster going
There's
forward.
a lot to do, and there's also teaching wise. About half of my teaching is dedicated to human rights issues in the context of tech. So there's so many things to do. Really, this could be a good platform if it just worked out. People who regularly took part in the meetings.
Yes. Okay. Great. And now I say, last but not least, over to John Ferguson, who leads a cluster which is not focused on an industry, but it focuses on one discipline of management taught at every business school around the world, accounting. Yet, what does human rights mean for accounting is not clear to all instructors of accounting. So I count on you, John, to help us mainstream human rights in the accounting discipline.
Okay, thanks very much, Doro. Good to see everyone, and sorry I can't be with you this afternoon. Just in terms of update, the biggest thing happening in the cluster is that we have our first workshop in January. So that's a workshop on teaching accounting and business and human rights. And that comes through the Center for Social and Environmental Accounting Research. So they've established an education community of practice initiative. And as part of that, there's been a couple of events on climate change and so on, but we thought we would use that platform to run the first accounting and finance cluster event on teaching business and human rights. Accounting and business and human rights. For the workshop, we have a panel which includes myself and Yingru Lee from the University of Glasgow. And Yingru is also an active member of the accounting and finance cluster. And also we have Catherine Christ from the University of South Australia and Mercy Denido from the University of Durham. So for myself, I'm going to be talking about the accounting and reporting requirements associated with human rights due diligence. I believe Yingru is going to be talking about developing a dedicated module on accounting for human rights. Because from conversations with other members of the group, I think we probably offer maybe 1 or 2 lectures on accounting for human rights. But Yingru is the only one that I'm aware of in the cluster that actually has a dedicated module on accounting and human rights. So Yingru is going to be talking about that. And Catherine and Mercy are going to be talking about the accounting and reporting requirements related to mandatory modern slavery requirements. So that's I guess the biggest thing happening in the cluster. I have tried to expand the cluster a little bit. I think we have around 12 official members, but I've been trying to recruit. I'm aware that there's been a couple of special issues in accounting journals around modern slavery. So I've been targeting authors who have published in those special issues. So I think I have a mailing list of around 40 people who are loosely working in the accounting and finance and investment area related to business and human rights. So hopefully we can expand the cluster and use the workshop in January as a kind of jumping off point to develop a few other initiatives. And just on that, Yingru and I have both been in discussion about how we might use the event in January as a basis of developing a toolkit. So we'll take that forward in January, and I think we'll probably get in touch with you, Charles, just to get some ideas on that acceleration initiative that you've developed in the modern slavery cluster. Okay, that's all my updates.
Sounds good, John. Thank you. I think your work is very important because, as I said, accounting is taught at every business school, and as we hope to bring human rights into each course and aspect of it into each course, you could really lead the way to model this for accounting. I really hope for your guidance going forward. We also have accounting classes here, and it's important that we understand how to bring this human rights lens to accounting. I'd love to have another cluster on finance and another cluster on marketing. And so really warm invitations for anyone teaching marketing to figure out what is, how could human rights be brought into the marketing subdiscipline of management teaching. That would be wonderful. I have one cluster not on this slide, which was originally led by Berit Knaak, my colleague here on agriculture. The group is also, I would say, reforming and potentially joining forces with the global supply chain cluster, but just a quick word on our plans, and we have brought the group together. So please, Berit.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. So the agriculture research cluster is a relatively new and small research cluster. We actually founded the cluster because we benefited from the GBSN community in our own research in this field at the time, which was about coffee and sugarcane in India. So one way we benefited was through tacit knowledge that scholars from that country had or who had done research in that field. And another concrete benefit was also through references and referrals and connections that they could make. So as Dora mentioned, we had a meeting last month to get together and also discuss the future orientation of this research cluster. And what we found is where we stand now is that there is a lot of interest in this topic, but not so much research being done by the scholars who have interest in the field. So many of the projects actually relate to or tie in with other fields as well, such as supply chain, many of the times, or technology, for example, in relation to supply chain visibility, or also gender and community questions. And a second observation that we made was that we find that the relevance of agriculture in relation to business and human rights is quite high as well. Like we see in terms of food security, consideration of geopolitical conflicts, or in relation to climate change, which is changing the parameters of many of the workers in the industry and affects livelihoods, or also in relation to eliminating child labor. So in terms of moving forward, we now discuss whether we can, at this point, maybe set up a platform to collect research that kind of connects to agriculture or uses that as a case study, and then at some point put the puzzle pieces together. So just to get more visibility at this point. And from what we understand, the GBSN also helps organize these kind of platforms to have a place where you can put the research. Second option that we would explore is to actually merge with other research clusters, such as the supply chain cluster that we've heard about before, which is quite active. So if you have research in this field or research interests or would like to engage in that, please let us know, and yes, we'll take it from there.
Because we might also misjudge that there are not enough people working on issues relating to human rights and agriculture. So if you're missing out on anyone out there, please reach out, and we keep that cluster as a separate cluster. So to be discussed going forward. We have with us today Nicholas Ignieri. I know he joined a couple of minutes ago, and Nick, you got a flavor listening into the cluster work we've been doing over the past year. Last year and the year before, your colleague Stephanie Bryant joined us to talk about the increasing role of an impact focus that is expected of business schools, to highlight, well, how does this research actually play out in practice, and how does it make a real life impact? So from the theoretical research to the real world. And Stephanie was very supportive of the type of work we do here. Your role is a bit different. You're the Global Chief Product Officer, and you also have an idea for how to elevate our human rights lens in the context of a growing debate on how to bring in sustainability to business school education, sustainability broadly, often sustainability that is environmentally focused, not really focused on human rights yet, but that's a puzzle piece that we could bring to the table. So Nick, please let us know how you see our work in the context of the many initiatives that you're aware of.
Sure, well, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, I've been on since the beginning of the session, and it's been very interesting to listen to. So thank you for the opportunity. So yes, I'm Nicholas Ignieri. I am the Chief Product Officer here at ASCSB. For those of you who might not know ASCSB. We are the accrediting body for business schools, one of the accrediting body for business schools. We have a pretty large reach. We have about 950 accredited business schools around the globe, about 595 in the Americas, 185 in EMEA region, and about 170 in the Asia Pacific region. Those are accredited schools. We also have schools that are in process to be accredited, and roughly about 180 schools in process. And overall, we have about 1,800 members, because we also have a lot of businesses who are members of ASCSB. So we have a pretty large reach around the globe with the business school community and the business community. And I just can't help thinking about the opportunities here with ASCSB and everybody, all the work that's being done, our ability to amplify that work across the business school network. You know, what was stated is ASCSB's focus, not only as an accrediting body, which we will be, but also expanding our mission to include societal impact. And I wasn't with ASCSB when Stephanie and our membership decided on the term societal impact, but I think it was the right decision. You know, we do have some work that we're working on currently to kind of talk more about what we mean by societal impact, because it's not a term that's commonly used. You know, many speak about sustainability, planetary health, or human rights, labor rights, etc. There's different frameworks, whether you want to use ESG or SDG, and that's all fine. We're looking at societal impact as the much broader term that includes all those other options, you know, under it. And the reason why we are happy that we chose that term is because it gives the flexibility of our school network to focus on the areas that are aligned to their mission and their purpose as a academic institution. So whether a school is working on sustainability or human rights, that is fine as far as we are concerned. So in our effort to focus on societal impact, we have a couple of key strategic drivers that we're focused on, and I'll go through them, and if we want to discuss them in any way we can. One area that we're working on, which I think is really important here, is to identify the systemic changes needed in the business school. And we're going to do that through a number of ways. One is, you know, collecting data from the business schools about those changes, talking to the business community about the changes they need in respect to the talent pipeline coming out of the business schools. And also ASCSB has an innovation committee, and we're working with that innovation committee to focus on those systemic changes in business schools that need to shift in order for the business school to focus more on sustainability and human rights content within their curriculum. You know, and what we're focused on is not having that content as an add-on, but really integrating those topics into the curriculum. Secondly, we are the 2020 standards came out last year. They're new standards for us, and the main difference there's a lot of differences in the standards, but one of the key differences is Standard 9, which is a new standard, which is on societal impact. So we're going to use the new standard to drive change in the business school. It is now required that business schools within their evaluation is to indicate how they're impacting society, and schools are beginning to do that. You know, it's new, so schools are struggling a little bit with identifying and understanding exactly how they're making impact and how to report that out. But we're working with our schools, and over time, you know, we will get there. But that standard is creating a lot of movement within the business school community to focus on impact. So that's a great thing. The third thing we're working on, and this is where I see a lot of opportunity here in the sessions that I've listened to, we're looking at the functional leadership competencies that are necessary to embed into business school curriculum. You know, the functional competencies competencies, would be sustainability, human rights content embedded into the various focuses in business school, whether it's finance, marketing, strategy, et cetera. What are those functional competencies that need to be embedded into that curriculum? And then more importantly, or as importantly, I should say, is what are the leadership competencies that are emerging? I think leaders of the future will, maybe not so much the future, it's probably happening more today, but also extending forward, is what are those leadership competencies? Leaders are going to be facing very different challenges than they're facing currently as organizations shift business models towards sustainable business models and focus more on human rights and labor rights moving forward. So that's an important piece of it. And we're exploring the functional leadership competencies of the future in a cross-stakeholder methodology, getting together students, business schools, businesses, policymakers, government agencies, nonprofits and NGOs to really talk about those different perspectives, what's happening in each of those communities, and where we see the movement going. So a lot of work is happening in that space. Fourth area of work that we're doing is around data. So ASCSB has a lot of data on business schools, and we're working on what we're calling a societal impact data product, which will allow schools to look at, not only input what they're working on around societal impact, but also look at, schools in their region, schools across the globe, and what they're working on. It will provide opportunities for connection between business schools if they want to collaborate around common topics that they're working on around societal impact. We're also looking at bringing in business data to also in the future connect business schools with businesses who are looking for talent or curriculum within certain areas. And then lastly, this is the newest piece that we're working on. So it's a little immature, so not a lot of information on it, but we have started these projects, is to work on, write a paper, a research paper, and we're in the process of doing this. We met with our research team yesterday, actually, on a taxonomy for societal impact, because what we find, and we're finding in working with business schools and businesses, the terminology is all over the place, and a lot of people don't understand the difference between the terminology emerging in the space. So, creating a taxonomy, looking at societal impact as the kind of top of the taxonomy, and also looking at the various frameworks that are out there and how they relate to taxonomy structure. And the other part of that are measurement models. I mean, business, this is probably the earliest, it's more conceptual at this point, but do business schools or schools in general need a measurement model? And I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the sort of, B Labs and organizations becoming B Corps. And there is a evaluation process for an organization to become a B Corp. Is that a valid approach for schools? Do we need that? Do we want to do that? So we're in the process of collecting data on that, looking at various measurement models that are in the market and seeing can those be adopted for either the business school or potentially the university, as a whole. So those are our key initiatives that we're working on, and our focus is to work with business schools to support them in focusing the business school on a people, profit, planet, and not what business schools traditionally focus on, which was a pure profit model. As businesses move away from a pure profit model, we need to educate students differently in order to support the future talent needs. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about that. If there's any questions or we want to open it up for dialogue, that would be great.
Nick, thank you for being with us. Of course, I have an immediate follow-up question. Thank you for your update on your how you're advancing societal impact. Of course, ASCSB's focus areas are incredibly influential for business schools around the world. So as you focus on societal impact, I think us instructors for business human rights, this helps us. It's good news because this is exactly what we're after. We're called an impact community. So we're fully aligned. But could you, in those 5 initiatives that you described, highlight again how you see our focus on human rights coming in? You said business schools should not just focus on profits, but also on planet. Can we please add people?
Yes, we can add people. Yes, people, profit, planet. Yes. You know, I think, you know, one of the great things about ASCSB is our reach, right? So it's been very interesting to hear all the work that's being done in the area of human rights, but how do we, you know, you know, I think, Dorothy, we talked about this a little bit when we first spoke, is this the opportunity? Is this the time to bring a lot of these organizations together and really drive for change? There's organizations working on human rights. There's organizations working on sustainability, regenerative business models. You know, ASCSB is trying to influence that and push that within the business school community. Is there power in a larger collective saying, you know, this is where we're at. Here's content on human rights. Here's content on labor rights. Here's what we're working on sustainability. Here are the shifts in business model. Here is the research that's supporting these initiatives within the community, and have a place where schools can go and look at that. Because if we do this school by school, it's going to take us way too long. If we can gather the information and push it out and you know, work with schools to embed human rights and labor rights and sustainability curriculum in content into their curriculum at a much, we need to scale this, I think is what I'm trying to say. And I think we could scale this through a larger network and not school by school.
Thanks, Nick. I'm all for scaling and having a puzzle piece on human rights in your scaling efforts. We've been talking a lot, and I'm very keen to open this up to the online audience and people here. And Sandy already raised her hand and has a comment or question. So Sandy, please.
Sorry, his name again is?
Nicholas, yes, hi.
Hi, representing from Curtin University of Technology in Western Australia, and as a board member, we've gone through the exercise of getting accredited by your body. That's very interesting. And, you know, while Dorothy was asking a really good question about how do we move the ticker, another question I would like to ask is if AACSB would be in the process of assessing business schools to get accreditation based on certain human rights subjects that they have, or
well, yeah, not specifically human rights. Again, we a school, you know, where our standards are not prescriptive. Schools come to us and they say, this is what we're working on. This is what's tied to our mission. This is what's tied to our strategic plan. And some schools may come to us and say, as we evaluate them on the societal impact standard, they may come to us and say, this is what we're doing in human rights. And that would, you know, certainly align to the intent of the standard. But we're not prescribing that the schools must focus on human rights. Some schools may be focused on sustainability or, you know, other topics in the societal impact ecosystem. So if they come to us with human rights, that's great, but we won't say you must work on human rights. But I think the way we can get more schools to work and focus on human rights, because it's critically important, is to educate the schools on what's happening in human rights, what's the research happening in the human rights space. And this may then generate interest within the school to focus and align that to their mission.
Nick, this is Mike. I want to just follow on Sandy's question and ask this in a different way. Somewhere in between demanding it and waiting for it, is asking about it. And so I guess the question would be, is it possible in the way in which you interact with schools, not to say this is a requirement, simply ask the question, are you teaching courses? Is there a human rights course? Is human rights integrated into a supply chain course? or a management operations course?
Mhm.
Are you, when you're teaching ESG, how much focus is there on the S? You could come up with a questionnaire in the context of what you're doing that just simply would give a better sense to all of us of who's doing what. We're trying to do that. You talked about scaling. We're trying to get a bunch of schools to do this. It would be a terrific vehicle for us to get better information, and it would prompt schools, I think, to begin thinking about, oh, they're asking about it. It's not to say you're demanding it as a requirement of accreditation, but you're simply putting it on the radar screen. And I would say, again, our experience, I'm speaking from my own experience in Dorothy, sustainability is not human rights. There's a huge amount of effort on environmental sustainability, and there are lots of schools doing that. When you talk about whether it's labor supply chains or disinformation online, or a lot of the things that people around this room and on the screen here are doing, it's a very different set of subjects. They need to be integrated, and I love your idea of bringing it together.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a discrete set of things that need to be put on the agenda, and most schools aren't teaching it, and most schools aren't doing research in it.
Sure, and that's an easier question for us to discuss. And I think, as you were speaking, I couldn't help but think that's kind of the purpose of our data product that we're working on, right? Is how do we collect data on what schools are doing, and maybe we can drill down in that data product more over time, specifically around what's integrated into the curriculum, how much time is spent on it, et cetera. Some of the things you mentioned. So yeah, I think, focusing on collecting the data from the schools and really communicating that across our global business school network would be an important step. So yeah, I would love to talk more about those data points, that information that would be valuable, and seeing how we can add that to, our emerging data product.
Yeah, we'd love to talk to you about that.
Right.
Love to help.
Okay, good. We could do that. Mhm.
There was one more reaction from Jonathan, please.
Well, I just want to associate myself with Sandy and Mike's remarks. I'm Jonathan Coley from RMIT, also from Australia. Mike asked a similar question, but I was simply going to ask if there's any formal engagement access points that we could have to lobby, advocate for human rights within the AACSB process and standards. That seems to me to be a wonderful product that this group could produce, a formal submission or an informal submission or a presentation to a AACSB governance board.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that I think many people in this room would jump at the chance at.
Well, I would say yes. I think we just have to work. We have to work through the details of that. So maybe Dorothy, we can speak after and talk about how we can more tightly align and begin to work more closely together. Because I think, yes, having representation from the human rights side across various pieces of AACSB would be really critically important. And I think it's important to not just talk about sustainability, because sustainability isn't human rights, as you just said, and I agree with that. So we need to focus more on the human rights labor side as we focus on the sustainability side. So yeah, I'd be more than willing to figure out how we make that happen and we move forward in that respect.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have a comment. I mean, also for the people in the room and in the chat about how we can work on advancing this. Then you were talking about the video and the voices of the students. I think it's been 6 years. In the case of Mike, almost 10 years. It would be interesting at the level of GBSN or the impact community, maybe to try and see what students who've benefited from this course also have been doing. Remy, which we saw in the video, speaking on behalf of PRI, was a student in my business school just 2 years ago, doing a specific sustainability and not so human rights focused course, but he's now looking at human rights and responsible investment. So I think it would be interesting to try and see what students who are studying these new course are doing, and maybe pool the information from at least the members of the different clusters. I don't know if it should be done at the university level. It's maybe more of a teachers engaging with some of their former students, try to collect data, also to be able to document that these students are finding opportunities. To what extent are they actually working in business and human rights after they follow these type of courses? And that could also play in helping demonstrate that there is a case, as was said, because that's a language I think a lot of business school administrators are sensitive to, fortunately.
So, I always tell my classes that I'm teaching you for your seventh job. I say when you go to work for Goldman Sachs or McKinsey, they're not going to ask what you think about human rights. If you're running a Fortune 500 company, it's the stuff that's going to keep you up at night. So keep your notes, hang in there. You're going to be glad you took this class. If I can just offer a couple of thoughts, these are things we're thinking about, and I would love both to get some feedback and along the way. Teaching research engagement, teaching. We're eager to get a sense of whether or not people in this room on the phone have the opportunity to teach a standalone course, or alternatively, to integrate into existing courses. Where's the opportunities? Where are the challenges? Where's the pushback? I'll speak again. I'm at NYU, and we have 9 or 10 people working there. I've been trying for 10 years to get into a supply chain course. And the people who teach the course say, we don't have time to talk about labor. We're talking about supply chains. And I go, wait a minute, aren't the people working in supply chains part of that conversation? Well, we're talking about, the issues of where the blockages are, and we want to make supply chains efficient. That's a hard conversation to have. I've been having conversations with our finance people about getting the S into ESG. They say, we're glad to take your reports or your notes and we'll incorporate it. Do they? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. And so I think one of the things we want, and again, we want to get data from you all about what's your experience, how can we be helpful, what are the challenges you face, and how can we together figure out how to overcome it. Standalone course and integrating into existing curriculum. Second, research. Laura said it, and I said it briefly. The model of business tenure track is that you get articles into peer-reviewed journals. Peer-reviewed journals were not set up and still are not set up to put human rights at the top. And so if you're trying to get ahead in the academic tenure world, you try to figure out how to squeeze it in, but it's really hard. And so we need to acknowledge that and then figure out what does it mean. One of the things we've done, and again, it doesn't solve the tenure track problem, but we're putting out reports that we call translational research. The other problem is data. This is a field that's replete with data that we don't have access to. Talk about supply chains. Walmart has a hell of a lot of data, or Amazon, about its supply chains. It's not, so does Facebook, Meta. They have a lot of data. They're not keen for people in the academic world or others, the media, to get access to that data. The data is not very becoming. And so I always say we're in the dark side of the moon. We're working in the dark side of the moon. There's lots of things going on and we want to research it, but we're not getting access to the data that's most important. So how do we overcome that? Are there ways, again, creative thinking about how do we get at that? Mandatory due diligence in Europe is going to get at that. The SEC in the United States is trying to get at data about human capital. We're going to wind up finding ways that governments are going to demand data. We need to be part of those conversations and beneficiaries. So let's think about what's the way to get better data, to share strategies for collecting data in a way that will make even the peer review academic research easier. And then the other translational reporting is basically to take what exists and talk about the problems in a way that has application. So those are some things. I have one other thing. I'm going to stop. I'm going on too long, but I want to make one other point about ESG and about due diligence. This is sort of what we were just talking about with Nick. It seems to me that there is, and maybe this goes to the clusters we have and how we deal with it. The subject of ESG, at least in the US now, is a big deal. There's $35 trillion in these ESG funds. Everybody talks about it. It is substantial, and it's being attacked from the left and the right. We have states in the United States now. The state of Florida has decided they're not going to take state pension money and put it into BlackRock, of all places, because they have ESG funds. It's woke capitalism. It's part of our ridiculous politics in the United States. ESG is woke capitalism. Okay, that's one side. And then on the other side, you have a bunch of people that are critical of ESG for not having integrity. It's a marketing tool. It's evaluating risks to investors, not people on the planet. And the S is missing. However bad the E is, and it's not great, the S is God knows what it is. And so that's a field where I think academic research to really untangle what the heck is going on here, and more importantly, to make some recommendations. How do we make it real? I'd say the same thing for you on the due diligence side. Due diligence is a wonderful, vague concept. And all of a sudden, we're going to have 27 European countries trying to figure out what due diligence is. Let's give it content. We need standards. We need metrics, ways of evaluating. It's got to be done in each industry. So there's a lot that we can be researching. But again, I'd love thoughts on all this, and we'd love to sort of work with you, figure out what's going on, and are there ways we can help each other. The idea of the research clusters is to find people who are working on things like this and figure out how do we help each other. So that's what this was set up to do. And we're making some progress, but we got a long way to go. To say the least, we haven't solved it. So thoughts and reactions, Sandra, please.
Yeah, I'm Dante. I'm the director from Chile. I'm a director for 21 years of a research center or think tank, maybe, inside my business school. And yeah, so we have been doing, and it's exclusively on responsible business. And we're a team of 12 people. We've had something more than 300 projects over the years. All of them, we label them as learning labs. And then we plug the lessons into our training and capacity building with something more than 8,000 students over the years, so in 24 countries. So we do have quite a bit of experience, very little knowledge management, because we don't get money for that. So we lost a lot, and we're losing all the time a lot of lessons learned, which is very unfortunate. And every time we lose a team member, we lose a lot of experience, which is extremely unfortunate. Anyway, so on the standalone question, never. I mean, always standalone, never plugging in, never. We have never been able to plug in any school, engineering, law, a business school, ever in any class of any professor. Zero. But we do have a lot of standalone, never for undergrad students. Few times maybe, sometimes MBA students with little interest, a lot of interest from professionals already working. So executive training, we're completely flooded and completely flooded. 20 years ago, 18 years ago, when we started training, was mostly community affairs people, journalists. Today, half of our students are engineers. In the operational side, civil engineers, about half. Growingly lawyers, mostly related with compliance, board, etc. So it's an incredible change in the profile of our students, with huge demand for, let's say, interdisciplinary learning. So, and what the students say the most valuable thing is learn from peers. They say, you know stuff, but it's you don't wear my shoes. So if I do things wrong, I get fired. And if we don't get the things done well, my company runs out of business. So, and if you don't do things well, they are lessons learned. And so, you know, you're going to be there forever. And so we're not in the same footing or whatever, at the same level. So that's quite interesting. That's why we always bring the practitioners to share their practical experience. And what they say is, we really learn way more from my peers and workshops than from you. You're all nice, but the really learning experiences from peers, not from academics. And so that's, again, kind of a reality check. But we have a lot of students, a lot of students in different countries, by the way, more and more virtual and interconnecting different disciplines, but also sectors, etc. Then on the research, complete failure. Every professor that is in the tenure track has zero incentive to work with us, because we do studies, not research, and we analyze reality, but not with the prime objective to publish. So for us, if we can publish something, why not? But our professors do opposite. And that's one of the reasons I quit from my PhD, because it was impossible. You know, I was always into trying to be in the real world. And every time I was pushed back from that, and you know, that doesn't matter. Do your research. This is the important thing. All the other thing, you know, that's for other people, engineers, let's say, or something, whatever. Yeah. So I might drop out of my dissertation or whatever. So, and I was having studied history originally. My PhD was in industrial engineering. So I had a incredible shift in terms of going through different disciplines. And then in terms of data, what the Working Group on Business and Human Rights last year categorized as shapers. So shapers in terms of data, shapers in terms of universities that can, let's say, shape the future somehow. We use the World Benchmark Alliance, so data that is available, partnership with them, partnership with Standard & Poor's, because they are monitoring in my part of the world about 300 companies regularly. So they have a lot of inside data, partnership with the Principles for Responsible Investment, partnership with GRI. So all data collectors in one way or another, it might be insufficient, not deep enough, sure, but they have been doing that for years. So you can basically track, compare with industry sectors, etc. And that is clearly doable. And a lot of this, what I'm sharing, is in the public domain. So a lot of it, you don't need really a partnership. For a partnership, you need, you know, you can go a little bit deeper. You can dig a bit more with what the numbers are showing, where they come from. But actually in the public domain, there's a lot already that can be put in public quite nicely. Yeah. Example, the World Benchmark Alliance has a very fine work on the extractive industries, on the oil and gas. 100 companies, the top 100, analyzed with, I think, maybe like 50, 60 criteria for evaluation, everything compared with everything in an electronic platform, very easy to navigate. So if you want to have a discussion with the oil and gas sector and you say, let's have a discussion about risks, you have the starting point is all there. You just have to get it and plug it into a PowerPoint. And basically you have it pretty much everything there, at least from a reasonably, I would say sophisticated anyway, not super deep, but sophisticated anyway. And the last point is the legislation in Germany. I mean, I will get as many German universities on board possible because there's tectonic change there. Tectonic change. I'm already, this year, I've been asked by 3 large German companies to be an advisor to their executive board and CEO on human rights in function of the legislation kicking in, because the board is going to be the final responsible for acting for the obligation of means, acting in good faith, and doing the reasonable effort to know about their impacts and avoid and mitigate them. So, of course, that is changing the dynamic in the companies, because if you might be liable as a board for not doing enough and not being able to prove that you're doing enough, of course, they somehow panic and they are taking positions And that has an incredible cascade effect inside the company because you to the board.
Nice to see you again.
Yes,
I don't know if you recall doing the thing in Colombia with us. Dante, going back to the curriculum, just a quick answer to the question. You said the standalone is the only thing that worked, but just to be clear, were any of those standalone courses a requirement for any program? So always electives, right?
No, not even. Always for executive education. So
not even for
not even.
MBA or
no, sometimes a module here and there in the MBAs, but basically the students also rank them very low. And the professors
didn't even gravitate.
No, they don't care for the most part, not yet at least. Yeah, I guess it's levels of maturity. But if you ask my son who studies anthropology, he will say climate change is everything and intercultural and diversity is everything. But in the business school, not yet. It might be, yes, but it's always market driven. So if the clients if the investors are asking companies, and they're starting to do that, then the recruitment process will start to recruit people with these competencies, and that will cascade into the business school. But we're not there yet there.
We just have a few minutes left. I want to be sure if there are other thoughts, other comments, questions, we get them before we turn, please.
I'm interested to know how we can get the A-grade journals to buy into this. Because like you said, you know, if you're a tenure track professor and you want to make sure it's a meat factory, literally. You have your PhD students and your PhD students are looking for ideas. So how can we lobby from a research community perspective on recognizing business and human rights to be top so that it would incentivize researchers to publish in those areas?
And I was looking to Dan, and I'm looking at the screen of my colleague Judith Sterling is still here. She publishes in excellent journals, sometimes also on business human rights topics. And I'm an editor of a co-section editor of the Journal of Business Ethics, and it's a special section on practice, where we hope to bridge between theoretical research and practical impacts. And I really want to write a little editorial to explain we need to broaden our range of research. So in this co-editor role, I'm inside an academic journal where I hopefully have a platform to then say, we need a range of research, including translational research, and it needs to be part of these journals as a section. In the Journal of Business Ethics, that's the case. Also for the Business Human Rights Journal, there's a development in the field section, but of course, both journals are not the Academy of Management journal, you know, that would be the A journal for management scholars. It's still in the niche of ethics where we, I think, most easily come in with our work.
So if we want to mainstream it, then we have to go into, say, supply chain management journal.
Yeah.
We may have to go into strategic
management. Yeah.
Just to add,
behavior.
One of the things GBSN is involved with is helping to catalyze the development of a rating system for the journals that help researchers to understand which ones are publishing more in this space. The second thing is there's a group called the Responsible Research in Business and Management. I'm a founding member of the group, and their whole reason for being is trying to shift that system in an ecosystem way, because that's part of the challenge. Whenever there's an ecosystem, if only one part of the system tries to move, it ends up hurting that part of the system. So RRBM.network, I think. The third thing is the FT. It's not just the accreditation. I don't know if Nick is still on the line, but the ranking systems are a big player in this mix. And FT is one of the ranking organizations, but they also do now an annual responsible research award system. So this, I think, will also push more of the journals who want to be recognized as part of that system to publish more in this space. So there's a lot happening to try to change that system, but it's it was built, as we put it, for a specific reason over hundreds of years. So it's not an easy system to change.
We're almost out of time. I want to add one thing, how we are trying to also change the culture in academia. We are running what's called a Business Human Rights Young Researcher Summit since 8 years, where we invite young scholars, emerging scholars at the PhD stage or early postdoc stage to come either to Geneva or St. Gallen or to New York to present their projects to us at an early stage. We can, help to shape their work, and we hope to create a next generation of scholars that also understands the full range of research that is out there. And generates research that has a focus on impact. So this event takes place at NYU Stern this summer. And if all of you have students at the PhD level that can apply for this event, the deadline is in January. So I'm sure my colleagues can put a link in the chat as well for the application, but I count on you to send us your best students to create this next generation of scholars that eventually can also change the academic system. Yes.
Just one last comment. We're going to get you out of here on time. What's key to us in the period between now and next December, whenever we have the next meeting, is that we engage with you in a way that does two things. One, make sure that if we have information, if there's information among this group that would be helpful to others, that we make it available. Dan and Global Business School Network have been terrific in working with us to try to identify articles, papers, syllabus, whatever it is that somebody in this group thinks would be useful to others. We're trying to put that up periodically 3 times a year, something like that. So know that that's an opportunity, and please, it'll only work if you participated and come. Second thing is that we are actively always trying to figure out who's missing, which schools ought to be there. I sent out in preparation for this meeting a letter to the 10 deans of the 10 highest ranked US business schools. I got one response from a school that said, we're not interested. That's not very good. And so we need to figure out who are the people at those schools who we ought to be talking to. It's not the dean. Who's going to be our alumni, and how do we move forward? So, but again, I've said before, come again next year and bring a friend, identify somebody you know in another school and get them to come be part of this. It's only going to work if we really get a critical mass. We're making progress. And it's really to Doro and Pascal and to Dan, who've done enormous work to make this as strong as it is. We need to be stronger. We need to break through the mainstream schools that are pretending this is part of sustainability, but they're not actually digging in on human rights. Last comment. I did years ago, I have a law background and I taught at law schools. We created law and human rights programs, clinics, all 30, 40 years ago almost. It was easier. Business schools are much harder because the premise is everything is tied to return on investment, and in the US, short-term return on investment. This is a subject that demands a fresh way of thinking that says, if we're really serious about this, companies are going to need to make investments, cash, people, time, and it's going to require that they think differently about what constitutes success as businesses. That is a big challenge, and the people on our 9th floor in the finance department would shoot me if they heard me say that, because they're living in a different world. So please be part of our world. Glad you are, and let's figure out how to get to the next level. Thank you, Doro. Thank you, Pascal.